Good morning, good evening, and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming to today's EI webinar, Reading the Beijing Summit. It's been just a week since the conclusion of the summit. So what the Trump-Xi meeting means for Washington, Beijing, and Seoul is the subject for today. So it's great pleasure to welcome all of you, and we have outstanding presenters. So we'll discuss about the repercussions, strategic implications of that summit to not just Washington, D.C. and Beijing, but also Seoul and other East Asian countries. So the central question for us today is not simply whether the meeting went well or badly. The more important question is what kind of a strategic game is now unfolding between the U.S. and China, and what are the emerging strategic, rules between two countries, and what are the implications of the summit to East Asia and South Korea in particular. So we read very diverse evaluations of the summit in both countries in Seoul. So we'll check all those important points with outstanding three presenters. So let me briefly introduce three panelists who are already very well known, not just Korea, but globally. First, we have Professor Robert Ross of Boston College. Professor Ross is one of the most distinguished scholars of Chinese foreign policy, U.S.-China relations, and East Asian security. His work has shaped how many of us understand great power politics in Asia, especially the interaction between powers, geography, and strategy. Today, we look forward to hearing his assessment of what the summit tells us about U.S. strategy, Chinese behavior, and the broader balance of power in East Asia. So he visited EAI last December. So if you want to hear his general view about China, you can visit our website. It's posted in the website to hear the excellent lecture that he gave us last December. Second, we are joined by Professor Tiejun of Peking University, an old friend of mine. So he is one of China's leading scholars of international relations and security studies. And he also studies international relations theory and history very broadly. He's a great scholar. So he brings an invaluable perspective from Beijing in a moment when many discussions of China take place without sufficient understanding of Chinese strategic thinking. His insights will be especially important. We hope to hear how Chinese analysts interpret the Trump-Xi meeting, what Beijing may expect from Washington, and how China sees the future of regional and global order. Last but not least, we have Professor Jaewoo 교수님 of Kyung University. He's a leading Korean expert on Chinese foreign policy and Northeast Asian security. His perspective will help us connect the summit to South Korea's strategic choices. For Seoul, the issue is not only how to understand the relations, but how to act wisely between US and China. So he will help us to think through the implications for South Korea's diplomacy, alliance policy, and regional strategy. We have a simple format. We will finish by 10:30 Korean Standard Time. We will first hear from all our three presenters, their initial remarks for 10 minutes each. After that, I will raise some questions for the discussion, and there will be panel discussions among the presenters for about 20 or 30 minutes. So first, please join me in welcoming Professor Robert Ross for his initial remarks.
Thank you, President Chun. To answer your very first question, I believe this summit was a major success. I think this is something of a dissenting view in the United States. Most people are criticizing Trump for coming home with nothing, with no accomplishments. But personally, I think it was a major success. I think that in part because we're rebuilding a relationship that was basically on the verge of a new Cold War after Trump 1.0 and after Biden. And we have to start over again at the beginning. So to expect major accomplishments, I think, was unrealistic. And to do so, we have to understand that this is a great power relationship as well. And to expect major accomplishments and breakthroughs between these two most important great powers in the world, I think was also unrealistic. So I think many people were expecting great breakthroughs and agreements, and I think that was the wrong baseline. So there was no new communique, but there was never going to be a new communique. There were never new major agreements with details, because that doesn't tend to happen at summits anyway. And even if we had MOUs, they tend to be very vague. If you look at the recent Putin-Xi agreements, they're still very vague with promises, with no commitments. So again, the expectation of a breakthrough was unrealistic. Some would have said that Donald Trump could have been another Richard Nixon going to China. I think that's silly. Others said we could have Ronald Reagan with a new SALT agreement going to China. I think that's silly. We're just a very different world with the two great powers and intense competition, and this is a long process of trying to manage a relationship. So I think from that perspective, we did quite well. Now, there were no detailed MOUs, but that's to be expected. Same with the Putin agreements. The Chinese side call these preliminary agreements. And I think that's right. I think that's also appropriate. There is so little confidence on either side that each side will carry through what it said it would do, then neither side is prepared to move forward with commitments until it sees what the other side is prepared to do. So we're in an era now of not of making commitments to each other, but in looking for reciprocity in a step-by-step process, waiting to see whether this country will do this, then we can do this. And so what we saw are assurances that countries are prepared to do something going forward, but waiting to see whether the other side will reciprocate. So we're in a world of quid pro quos, step by step, rather than prior commitments. Now, the first step is whether we can have this reciprocity. It's difficult. After all, the first Trump 1.0, we had a difficult time with commitments over the first trade agreement. And so both sides are wary of that. And we remember in the first Trump administration, Trump was careful on Taiwan in the beginning, but then he escalated American cooperation with Taiwan. So again, there's some lack of confidence there as well. So we're waiting for the quid pro quos. Now, the first step in reciprocity and quid pro quo is Chinese expectations that Americans will exercise restraint on Taiwan. If America is going to move forward with these reported arms sales, if America is going to move forward with a phone call between Donald Trump and Lai Ching-te, then there will be no reciprocity, and any agreements that we'll reach will fail. And I think if Donald Trump believes that Taiwan is a good bargaining chip, he is mistaken, and he will have China call his bluff, and the relationship will not advance. Perhaps he simply is being Donald Trump and speaking out of his mind. I don't know. Maybe he would like someone from the administration to talk to the Taiwan administration and tell them, do not cause problems. In which case, the Chinese side might be happy with that, as long as Donald Trump doesn't make the phone call. So there are many things that can mean, but until there is mainland confidence that there will be American restraint on Taiwan, and Donald Trump will continue his remarks in the aircraft about, I do not want to see a war over independence, until there's confidence on that, I don't think the relationship can move forward. Now, the summit, I think, had some interesting accomplishments. We did create new commissions. We have a commission on investments. We have a commission on trade. Recall that during the Obama administration, we created many different commissions, and they were consolidated in the security and exchange dialogue. Trump canceled them, and Biden did not renew them. So we're starting over again, building bilateral relationships, bilateral dialogues with experts coming together to discuss real problems. That's an important step, recovering from the cancellation of these meetings in the past. Moreover, under the Obama administration dialogues, they were simply dialogues. I believe these panels, these meetings, these boards, these commissions are designed to actually negotiate real issues. and to actually see if we can have investment in each other's countries, to see if we can actually reduce some of the trade barriers. I think both sides would like to have investment, but it has to be in a quid pro quo, not a blanket agreement. But these boards will enable us to review case by case to reach agreements. I think that's a good thing. I think there's a possibility for reducing tariffs. We would like to see reduced Chinese tariffs on our goods, and Chinese would like to see reduced American tariffs step by step, and these boards can negotiate those individually. Will this happen? I don't know. But the establishment of these boards should not be dismissed as irrelevant, particularly since they were canceled by 1.0 Trump and never renewed by Biden. Second, we had an agreement on Boeing, 200 aircraft, with reciprocity, a quid pro quo of American commitment to provide China with the technology and equipment it needs for its CAC 919 civilian aircraft. That was important. Clear quid pro quo. China requires Western technology for its new civilian aircraft to have any chance of success, and Boeing requires Chinese aircraft purchases if it's going to stock begin to reverse and climb back. The Boeing stock has been declining for the last 4 years in a row. It needs the Chinese market. So there was, I think, an agreement on both sides that both sides needed it, and they were able to reach that agreement. Of course, there was agreement on soybeans and beef. Now, Trump has said, I want to reduce Chinese tariffs to America. That's his job, is to do that. If he doesn't, I think the Chinese will not buy those soybeans. I think they will not buy that beef, but that was the first step. And I think Trump would like to find a way to get there, but American politics and regulations may take a little while. The next step is, of course, tariff reductions and investments. It could happen, but it will be a protracted process. Now, at the same time, there are limits to this relationship. On tech transfer, both sides know very well that they are not going to provide the other side any capabilities. The U.S. is not going to provide Taiwan with any high tech that contribute to PLA capabilities. The Chinese know this, and they have no expectation that we are going to get rid of regulations that help the PLA. On the American side, we completely understand that the mainland is not going to ease rare earth exports to the United States to help the American military. Those are mutual constraints that both sides accept. But beneath that, there's a lot of room for flexibility. On the Biden administration, there was, I believe, an effort at decoupling to actually minimize Chinese access to any American technology. Trump has made clear that this is a strategic operation, not an economic operation. So there's still room for potential there to ease technology restrictions. And we've seen that with Trump with NVIDIA, and Biden would never have done that. So there's potential for that with constraints over cutting edge technologies that contribute to military on both sides. And of course, there are restraints on what can be done on Ukraine and Iran. Although I think it's important that the China-Russian joint agreement after Putin's visit did not mention the word Ukraine. I think this is a signal to the United States that China is prepared to do something if the situation is ripe or appropriate. And we know what that means. That means Taiwan. And there was some Chinese signaling about Iran saying we'd like to see the Strait open, but what are the quid pro quos on Taiwan? And so this is a very delicate operation because the Chinese don't have confidence in American commitment to maintain restraint on Taiwan, but there is potential there nonetheless. Having said that, in this contemporary period, when America is trying to build coalitions against China, including with Japan, including U.S. military activities with the Philippines, to expect China to unilaterally cooperate with the United States on Ukraine and Iran is unrealistic. So there are constraints there that will endure. Now, the regional impact of all this is, I think, still interesting. What does it mean for America's security partners in East Asia? I believe this summit consolidated the perception of the Trump administration as reducing its commitments to its security partners in East Asia. And that includes our commitment to South Korea, it includes our commitment to the Philippines, it includes our commitment to Taiwan. I think the Eldridge-Colby strategy was consolidated by this summit, one, for the very fact that this summit occurred, and two, there were no discussions by Donald Trump of American security relationship in East Asia. Unusual for a U.S.-China summit for a president not to remind or reaffirm our commitments to our partners. Now, there was a phone call with the Korean president after the summit. There was a phone call with the Japanese prime minister after the summit. It's important. There has been no discussions with Taiwan, no discussions with the Philippines. These countries have more to fear than the others. But even South Korea, I believe, cannot have much confidence in the administration in the aftermath of this summit. The fact that there's been nothing public by this president regarding Japan, regarding South Korea, regarding Taiwan, regarding the Philippines, I think makes clear that he does not want U.S. cooperation with these countries in East Asia to interfere with U.S.-China cooperation. He's made that clear about Japan. He's made that clear about Taiwan. And our policy toward the Philippines is, if you do not want to help us on flexible strategy, then we do not want to make this an issue in U.S.-China relations. I think that's going to be a long-term policy. The only question we have are the implications if there is a Democratic administration and all the old Biden advisors come back in. I think they will want to try and renew the Cold War again. My personal feeling is it would likely fail and be costly. My sense is that there is a growing recognition that what's happening today is a long-term trend in American strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You dealt with quite comprehensive issues. I sense some optimistic evaluation, which is good. So let me raise two questions. You already raised them. First one is Taiwan and second, Iran. So there is some concerns in South Korea because President Trump mentioned that future arms sales to Taiwan could be more conditional, raising very serious questions about the credibility U.S. policy toward Taiwan. So can you interpret President Trump's approach for the audience to Taiwan in this in a more historical context? And
Yes.
yeah, what message does this send to South Korea, Japan? So it's just a Taiwan-specific issue or as part of a broader pattern in which security commitments are becoming more conditional. That's a big concern here. Second one, you already mentioned about Iran. So does the Iran issue create a new rare opportunity for U.S.-China cooperation? Because both sides have an interest in regional stability and preventing nuclear proliferation, or does it become another area of strategic competition between two countries to pressure Tehran while Beijing uses its influence over Iran? So after all
Thank
these
you.
three remarks, I will come to you again. Okay, very
Oh.
good. And yep. And let me invite Professor Yu for his remarks.
Thank you, President Chang. Nice to be here. Yes, I agree with Professor Bob Ross's comments about the summit meeting. On this side, it was regarded as a historical landmark visit, even though there is no joint statement declared after the summit meeting. The substantial issues are more important than the protocol, than maybe the documents. I think the most important things of this summit meeting is to provide a definition of the China-U.S. relations. as a constructive relationship based on strategic stability. That's a very important one, considering the very complicated and challenging security environment. At the beginning of the talk between the two presidents, President Xi has mentioned the international environment. It's turbulent times, and as major countries of the world, the United States and China should work together to do more good things, big things, and substantial things for the world, to fulfill the expectation of the world. It's a kind of the question of the world for the people and for the times. So that's the first thing President Xi mentioned, and then the second one is very important for the bilateral relations to stabilize the China-U.S. relationship. Under Trump, the first term, China was defined as the most important competitor, strategic competitor to China, according to the 2017 National Security Strategy of the Trump administration, the first term. So since then, the bilateral relations declined substantially. And now after, 9 years, President Trump himself paid a state visit to China. And I think it's very symbolic for the bilateral relations. We need a détente. We need a strategic stability back to the, if not a normal track, but strategic stability. I think both sides has recognized the necessity for that after the 9 years, interactions. So that's, I think, the most important things to give a definition of the bilateral relations. And we do have we have a lot of discussion about the summit on this side nowadays, still ongoing. People pay a lot of attention to the concept. What does it mean of the strategic, constructive strategic capability, stability? We have a kind of rather official explanation for this. It means a positive stability with cooperation as the main stay, healthy stability with competition within proper limits, and constant stability with manageable differences, and lasting stability with expectable peace. 4 points of what does it mean for strategic stability. My personal understanding is to put this, if the bilateral relation is a kind of strategic competition which we denied before, to use this concept to define the bilateral relations. But now it seems to me we accept the strategic competition concept to define the bilateral relations, but with some very important constraint, that this kind of a strategic competition should be a peaceful one, a fairly one, to a sustainable one. So with so to be a partner, it's a kind of a fair competition, like a sportsmanship, not like it's a vicious and it's the zero-sum game competition. So I think it's extremely important to make it clear for the bilateral relations. In that sense, in the future 3 years on the Trump administration, the second. Even in this year, there will be or should be several times of summit meeting between the two presidents under the occasions of APEC in China and G20 in the United States. And also, this summit declared a state visit by President Xi in September to the United States. So there are several occasions for the two presidents to meet up this year. I think it has laid quite solid foundations for the future several years. That's the first thing. Many people said it might be, especially in the United States, as Bob mentioned, maybe as empathy, looks like an empathy definition. But I think if you consider the deterioration of the bilateral relations and also the very challenging international security environment, the two leaders of the two strong countries to make this kind of a definition at this juncture, I think is especially important. And secondly is about the trade. Tariff on this side is tariffs and technology concerns. On the American side, as Bob mentioned, is we define that in 5B, the Boeings, the beans and the beef and two boards, Board of Investment and the Board of Trade. I think it's also to create some mechanism, a direct mechanism to facilitate the bilateral investment and trade issues in the future. That's also very good things. Regarding the trade, I think that's maybe the most important things that Trump want to make during his visit, considering not so good situation domestically on the American side, especially the November the midterm elections, the economic situation, right, and the inflations. So he looks up very much about this trade with China. It's still a very important trade relationship for the United States and also for China. On the Chinese side, I think so trade with the United States, and especially considering the technological issues, and that's of course very important, even for Earth. We need to buy planes, aircraft. we need the soybeans and the beefs. So that's also we can do. And the third thing is regional security issues. Iran, crisis, and also Korea issues was also mentioned. Korean Peninsula issues, and the Ukraine things. Maybe the most important things is the Hormuz crisis, which caused a very serious problem for the world economy. The energy crisis around the world, South Korea, China, Japan, and India also imported so many oils. They're so important things. So for Trump, of course, it's more important. It doesn't seem well for him to manage these issues without a clear strategic purpose to conduct the war and how to end it. I think there are two consensus. China also shared quite a lot of strategic purpose with the United States on this. First of all, is to reopen the strait. That's important for every country, and don't allow any countries or any international organization to charge the passage toll. And also nuclear-free, Iran. So that's I think China agree with, and China always want to mediate, to settle down this warfare. It's not good for everybody. So I think there were consensus on that. But you know, this issues is very complicated, very challenging. So you killed so many spirituals, religious leaders of sovereign countries in this kind of surprise attack, and uh, so it's not easy to settle down. China want to do something, but cannot be settled down in short term. Regarding Taiwan, I think President Trump, maybe that's the biggest concern on American side for those kind of people who are traditionally, think this the commitment issues to Taiwan. I think not China had made it. I think on the Chinese side, China has made it very clear how serious this problem, Taiwan issues in the bilateral relations. This side mainly reported on this point. Trump's response actually didn't get a very broad coverage in all reports. And the messages we got from them is he got interviewed by the Fox News, anchor. I think the symbols, I think is quite good and it's very important. He said he don't want to say anybody or to go independent. Don't want to send the American forces to fight for a long distance, some places. So I think that's enough. And also the arms seal, to suspend the arms seals, send a good signals to the Chinese side. But Taiwan issue is, is for decades, the problems are very fundamental. We also cannot hold a very high expectation to, through one summit meeting, we can solve this kind of problem. So I think on Chinese side, our position is quite reasonable. That's the Taiwan issues, and also the Ukraine crisis. We don't know very much about this. What kind of thing we have talked about this? Just to follow President Trump's state visit, President Putin just visit China, and we declared two joint statements, very long, very interesting. So if you, you can say that regarding the Ukraine crisis. I think China's position is also kind of principled neutrality. Doesn't want to say the ceasefire and want to moderate and want to mediate the crisis. If President Trump could not that, he used to settle down the crisis overnight, but that's impossible. Also, China want to help, but how much we can help, we don't know. But China obviously want to play a constructive role in mediating the crisis management, Ukraine crisis. And regarding Korea Peninsula, so very interesting. Based on according to the fact sheets declared by the United States on the White House website, it's said North Korea denuclearization. But if you look at the Chinese version, American embassy, the North Korea has changed into Korea Peninsula. So that's I think made a difference, showing the differences on both sides. But we obviously want to see a stable situation in East Asia, which I think is gaining many momentum of the assertiveness and the autonomous, like Japan or those kind of countries, is becoming more unstable. I think that's a kind of a challenge even for China and also for the United States, how to manage the situation afterwards. So I would like to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Professor Yu gave us a very comprehensive evaluation in many areas. First, he gave us a good explanation of the concept of strategic stability, which has been discussed very much, not in Korea, but globally. What does that mean? And he gave us a very clear definition. It's a fair competition. So we know that the competition concept was not received by China, but now two countries are starting to talking about the concept of competition. So competition is okay. So I have been talking that rules-based competition will improve the situation actually to the region and globally. So I have a couple of questions. First one is very general. After the President Trump returned to office, there has been many views about U.S. foreign policy toward China. It became more transactional. President Trump preferred leader-to-leader approach. And there was a criticism that it's more unpredictable, hard to predict. So after the second summit meeting, the perception of U.S. foreign policy, has it changed toward a better or worse direction when you view President Trump's performance during the summit meeting? That's one general question. The second one is about the rare earth material. So there is some view that U.S. is maintaining some temporary truce with China because Washington feels that they are pressured by Chinese dominance in rare earth and other critical minerals. So do you think this will continue, give us a new momentum for a long-term U.S.-China good relations? Lastly, you mentioned about China-Russia relations. That's very interesting. So China seems to strike a balance between its policy toward U.S. and Russia. So what are the China's long-term strategic alignment toward Washington and Beijing? Will Beijing be much closer to Russia when it comes to global order, some anti-hegemonic rhetorics, missile defense, Golden Dome, all those things? So what are the future of China-Russia relations? There will be questions about Korean Peninsula, but I guess the floor, the audience will raise those questions. So thank you very much. And lastly, Professor Choo, please.
Yeah, happy to join this webinar. And my name is Jaewoo Choo with Kyung University. And I basically have three takeaways from the, recently concluded Xi and Trump summit meeting in Beijing. And one takeaway from a Sino-Russian summit just a couple of days ago. And I think I'd like to share my takeaway from the Sino-Russian summit, because in the joint statement, there's an interesting line that could be really meaningful to ROC U.S. alliance, as well as our defense against North Korea's nuclear threat. And I base my takeaways from open sources, including transcripts from President Trump's interview with Fox TV News, and Marco Rubio's interview transcript with NBC News, and Sino-Russian joint statement, as well as some other media outlets and so forth. And regarding U.S.-China relations, I think I'd like to share my three takeaways, as I said. And very first thing is, I think the focus of the bilateral relationship became really, really clear. Basically, we basically can understand what the foremost interest of each country is. And the United States, I think one of the biggest interests is to expand the opening of China's market. That was emphasized over and over by Mr. Trump as well as some other cabinet members. And for China, it starts from Taiwan and ends with Taiwan. It's all about Taiwan. They could take more soybeans and beef from America, and then Boeing jets and so forth, but they just want to make sure where Trump stands on one China policy as well as Taiwan contingency. So that's my first takeaway, and the second takeaway is the management. Both leaders declared that they like to manage the bilateral relationship, as Tiejun said, probably in the context of strategic stability. But the management here is, I think you can flip to the other side, and what they meant was competition will prevail and persist. And probably the management, what they meant by is, as Professor Ross pointed out, setting up commissions to manage the economic and trade relationship, probably at the lower level than we would like to see. That is the primary industries, first industry and second industry, with respect to agricultural products and so forth, and all these non-tariff trade barriers related to them. And I don't think they can go further to the level of third and fourth industries, or even AI industries and so forth. Because Marco Rubio made it really, really clear that cutting edge technology is something that the United States would like to maintain primacy over China, and the competition will go on. Yeah, they're not willing to transfer the cutting edge technology to China, and he made it very explicit about it. So basically, my takeaway was that on that particular note of cutting edge technology, basically that set the United States and China to take part, to part them away from each other. So basically, the United States and China will walk their own path, and I think that has a lot of strategic implications to the allies and like-minded states. And the third takeaway was the United States will not seek China's help, but support to resolve international conflicts, which is quite interesting. They all mentioned about China and the United States leaders. They both discussed about the situations in Iran and the Korean Peninsula and so forth, and even Taiwan. But Marco Rubio said, the United States is not there to seek China's help, but to get consensus from China, and that is to get support on American position on some thorny issues stemming from the Iran situation. And Tiejun also made it clear that China is on the same page with the United States when it comes to freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, and opposing, tolling system that Iran is contemplating right now. And the third is, what was the third one? Anyways, we all know what that is. But so basically there was a consensus. Iran not having nuclear weapons, and basically there was a consensus between the two leaders, and I think that's going to be the probably the basic line when it comes to looking at the Iran situation and other international conflicts, and the United States would like to still play a leading role in solving these problems, while it seems like China is going to be taking a more reserved position when it comes to international conflicts matters, and I think basically the China is going to be really reserved about these cases that are distant from China, but they're going to be really proactive when it comes to contingencies that is going to that might happen in the periphery of China, and that would include Taiwan Strait. But other than that, I don't think we can expect too much cooperation between the United States and China in resolving international conflicts down the road, unfortunately. And my takeaway from Sino-Russian summit that was recently concluded was that I think there was an interesting line that both Russia and China opposes some of these countermeasures against nuclear threats taken by non-nuclear states, and they include preemptive strike capabilities and nuclear extended deterrence measures and nuclear sharing programs and so forth, and to include counterattack capability, which the ROC-US alliance is all pursuing right now. So I think that has a lot of political implications, not only to ROC-US alliance, but also to prospective Sino-Korean relations, Sino-Korean-Russian relations in the future, because I think that is going to be put on the agenda if South Korea were to pursue better relationship with China in the future. And also, this government is hoping that our relationship with Russia would improve once and when the Ukrainian war is over. But at this stage, by looking at that joint statement, with all these defense measures that we are taking against North Korean nuclear threat, China and Russia made it really explicit that they oppose all these measures being pursued by by us, which is quite unfortunate that they would not look at the nuclear North Korea's nuclear threat and how much threat that it imposes on South Korea, and that is quite unfortunate. And all in all, I guess my concluding remarks would be, I think it became really clear that we shouldn't over-exaggerate the great rivalry between great powers that is going on between the United States and China. I don't think we should raise our expectations and have high hopes on cooperation between the two countries on international matters. And in the context of global supply chain, I think the picture has become really clear that the United States is not interested in transferring cutting edge technology or sharing it with China. And although Trump expressed that he'll be welcoming Chinese investment to the United States, but we look at U.S. Congress over the past 5 years or 8 years or so since 2018. When it comes to Chinese investment, they introduce a lot of bills but not all of them got passed. Not one of them, became a law, but at least, they introduced all these bills showing their concern about the potential threat of, Chinese investment to the United States. And I think that's really telling. And I think once the Chinese investment, although, Trump would like to have, but I think he's going to have a huge test to persuade U.S. Congress not to block it. So I think that's a long distance game here. And so I think for South Korea, we should be really clear about our role and position, and not only the American alliance structure, but also the global supply chain that the United States is rebuilding at this stage. And unfortunately, I think I sound a little bit, skeptic about the prospect of, U.S.-China relations, and in the context of our, ROC-U.S. alliance, as well as Sino-Korean relations. But, I like to finish my remarks with some optimistic note. And that is, I think we should still root for the United States and China to improve their relationship, because as an ally of the United States, it is good to root for the United States to have better relationship with China, because after all, in the eyes of Beijing, if you're an enemy's friend, then you're my enemy, right? If you're my friend's friend, then you're my friend. So for South Korea, I think the better the United States and China have good relationship, I think we are better off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You touched upon many interesting issues. So my first question is about the new technology that you touched upon in the second thing. So there was negotiations about the NVIDIA, H20 chip. So it was reported that President Trump permitted, the transfer of H20 200 chip, but it's reported that Beijing did not accept it. Probably they are reluctant to allow Chinese firms to purchase them. So how can we interpret this? President Trump's move show that U.S. is showing a shift from deny Chinese access approach to more transactional one, allowing some advanced technology to be transferred to China. That has implications about, so-called small yard, high fence, the Trump administration's policy to, limit the access of Chinese to U.S. technology and so on. And second one, you touched upon Taiwan issue and Iran issue. And in South Korea, there is a very conservative and provocative interpretation that Iran and Venezuela is all about China gain rather than the original issue, because United States try to, limit the flow of oils to China. So how do you think about this interpretation? Is this too much? Or are there some aspects of U.S. China gain in these moves? So let me give back to Professor Ross for my questions, or you can add that you didn't cover from your initial remarks for about 5 to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues, everything they had to say about the summit. There's a consensus here. I want to say first that perhaps the most important aspect of American policy toward the summit, and I consider it a success, is this is the first time in 20 or 30 years that the United States has agreed to negotiate with China on a quid pro quo basis. We're not lecturing, we're not demanding, we're asking what does it take to achieve our objectives in negotiations with China. And that's a recognition that China is now a great power, that we no longer have hegemony. Indeed, I think it's important to recognize that there is no single aspect of power in which the United States now has dominance. Even in the highest technology and cutting edge, we may have a small edge, but it's a small edge. In every other measure of power, China is leading. And even in technology, high technology with applied technology applications, we all know that China is able to move technology faster and better into consumer technologies in the United States. That has implications for GDP growth, for market share, for international influence. So this, I think the Trump summit was a recognition of this, that we can no longer demand, we must now negotiate. And I think that's something Americans have been very slow to recognize over the last 10 years, and I think that's an accomplishment. On the Taiwan issue, I agree. President Trump said on the airplane, we do not want to go 9,000 miles to fight a war. And I think he's right. Second, he said, I don't want to see independence. And I think that was a good statement. American policy for a long time had said that we do not support Taiwan independence, but we could sell Taiwan weapons. That was a very constructive policy of cooperating with the KMT, which also agree with that policy, of cross-strait stability, economic cooperation, dialogues, while the United States supplied Taiwan with the military capabilities necessary to deter the mainland from invading. I think that's an option going forward. As Professor Yu is saying, we cannot resolve this problem overnight. We will continue to sell arms to Taiwan, but they can be smaller quantities, less technology driven, so less provocative, while simultaneously making clear that we support cross-strait stability and we oppose independence. I think that's what Donald Trump would like to move to remove the Taiwan issue as an obstacle. I think that's good for South Korea. South Korea has made very clear they don't want to get involved in a U.S. war with China over Taiwan, which is another way of saying South Korea doesn't want a war over Taiwan, which means that South Korea would like to see the United States and China manage this relationship to avoid a war. And I think that's right. Is American credibility at stake? No. I mean, yes, of course. But the major source of American credibility problems is not Taiwan, it's the decline of American power and the rise of China. And so American resolve to defend its allies is reduced because the cost of defending them would be greater and the outcome would be less certain. That's the problem with Singapore, the problem with the Philippines, problem with South Korea. Every country in East Asia is concerned that with the rise of China, America is a less reliable ally. This is not diplomatic issues, commitment issues. This is just what happens when you have a power transition. And I think that's unavoidable. So I'm not worried. And also, of course, if we wanted to reassure South Korea following a Taiwan compromise, we could. We could increase our troop presence in South Korea. We could increase our troop presence in Japan. That's not difficult to do to compensate for a compromise somewhere else. I'm skeptical we would do that with South Korea, but I think we might well do that with Japan. On the Iran issue, I think the major obstacle to improving relations is that, and I think this was made clear by my co-panelists, that the United States does not welcome China's role in reaching an agreement with Iran and does not welcome China's role in reaching an agreement with Russia over Ukraine. Donald Trump does not want to share the international stage. If Donald Trump were to have a five-power coalition of Europe, China, the United States, and Russia, and Ukraine together, it might be possible. And China's role as the great leader of the world, bringing peace and cooperation, I think would be important to China, and it might be willing to cooperate to put some pressure on Russia, because its commitment has not been totally solid. But Donald Trump does not want to share. I think it's the same with Iran. He's made clear he will solve this issue by himself. Marco Rubio has said, we are not coming to China for help. They do not want China's help because Donald Trump does not want to ask China for assistance. I think that's a mistake. We could resolve these problems faster and easier because China would be more than willing to adopt that international prestigious role and use whatever leverage it have to reach a mutually acceptable agreement for no nuclear weapon proliferation, for free flow of oil, for stability in the Middle East. But that's not Donald Trump's objective. I don't think Donald Trump is in Iran or Venezuela for a China factor. The importance of Venezuela to China is still very small. The importance of buying oil from Iran is still very small for China. China's game is in East Asia. China's game is not its security game is not in Latin America. Its security game is not in the Middle East. I think Donald Trump is doing these things because he believes to make America great again, America can no longer face resistance by small, unimportant countries. And he's determined to go down as a great leader to solve problems other American presidents couldn't. Iran, Cuba, Venezuela. This is a personal objective that has no reflections of American security interests, whether about China or whether they're U.S. interests in Iran, Cuba, or Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Professor Yu, please.
Yes. Three questions. Yes. Trump is a very transactional. But we also think he's less ideological and pragmatic. Not very interested in human rights issues like those kind of things. And the MAGA, we said make America great again, MAGA, and making China the great regional nation. We can benefit with each other, the two countries. So it's not a so serious problem for China. I think the guideline for China to dealing with the Trump administration is to strive for the best and prepare for the worst. That's always a Chinese wisdom, because it's so uncertain, both for President Trump and also for the bilateral relations. As Jaewoo said, the competition is likely to go on. So we need to prepare for that. Although we think this summit meeting is extremely good, historical, and useful for both country and the world, but we need to prepare. The devil always lies in the detail. So in that sense, you mentioned the rare earth, how the two countries will deal with each other, the next phase. I think during the summit meeting, the two sides had made it clear. On our side, I think the next step is how to implement the important common understandings and consensus we have striked, we have reached, and make better use of communications channels, political, diplomatic, and meal-to-meal fields. So I expect the two countries will expand their exchange and cooperation in a lot of areas, such as the economy and the trade. Still, there will be problems in the future, I think. So we need the board of investment and trade, and health, and agriculture, tourism, people-to-people ties, and law enforcement. Actually, the meal-to-meal exchange, in short run, I think we will resume and this kind of meal-to-meal exchange to talk about the crisis management issues. We used to talk that before, but after some problems, so it's almost suspended. So I expect that will be resumed. So in those concrete areas, how to develop a kind of stability and cooperation. That's the next step we can watch. And thirdly, the China-Russian relations. I don't think even though we declare two statements of the summit meeting, I don't think there are big change in the bilateral relations. The baseline still is non-alignment, non confrontations, and non-targeting on the third party. So if we hold this line, I think we could we have very good relationship with Russia. It's a strategic partnership, comprehensive strategic partnership. But we also have bottom line. So we still respect the sovereignty and the territory right. It's integrity regarding the Ukraine crisis. So that's our principle and the position that we cannot change. So we can coordinate and cooperate on a lot of strategic issues with Russia, but it's still normal bilateral relations. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Very insightful comments. Jaewoo, please.
Yes, I got two questions from the moderator, and thank you for your questions. First thing on NVIDIA and Trump's permission to sell HB200 semiconductors to China. I think that that permission came a little bit too late. Because if we recollect a little bit, last year, China's successful invention of DeepSeek was sensational. And I think there, China gained confidence that, gained very much confidence that they can build their own semiconductors, and probably even a sophisticated one is, the HB200. And that Jensen Huang's proposition came in the summer of last year, I believe. And I made a similar proposition to Korean government a year before that, with our semiconductor, manufacturing bases in China are all closed, and we're not allowed to sell, high-end semiconductors in Chinese market. And I made a proposal to the government and said, just like Jensen Huang said, okay, we'll sell them low-end semiconductors to China, but we can share the profit. But the government didn't want to even bring that as an agenda before the United States, unfortunately. But anyways, yeah. So yeah, I think that's why even Jensen Huang's presence at this summit didn't draw too much interest from Xi Jinping. And second of all, I think Trump loves to show off. So that's why he brought 30 world-class CEOs of high tech to this summit just to show it off to Xi Jinping. That was my impression. As moderator pointed out, that there was already a shift in Trump's move when it comes to high-end technology transfer to China. And the second question related to Taiwan issues and implications that we can draw from Iran and Venezuelan case. I totally agree with Professor Ross's answer earlier. Security stakes for China in these regions are really small, marginal.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect too much of their policy, but rather, Venezuelan case, I think it had more implications for Cuba, and we are now seeing the effects. And it's good to see, Trump at least, approved humanitarian aid to go into Cuba. Anyways, but with Iran case, yes, I think it could be a little bit more concerning to Trump, because we remember the deal that Xi Jinping and Iranian government signed several years ago, and I believe it was in 2022, 2023, that the 40-year constructive partnership, strategic partnership between China and Iran, and China is committed to make $400 billion investment into Iran. And I think that was more of a trigger for the United States to seriously consider China and Iran relationship in recent times. So that's my interpretation of these two cases, and I think that'll be all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have about 10 minutes, so I just pick up one short question about North Korea. And each of you, maybe Professor Ross and Professor Yu, can answer this question. If you look at the White House fact sheet and President Xi Jinping's statement, there is a little bit different nuance about North Korea. U.S. talked about North Korea's denuclearization. However, Chinese counterpart only noted that they exchanged their views. So how can we interpret this? But actually in South Korea, there was little expectation that North Korea will be on the table. So is this a good sign, or does it express some differences in view about North Korea? So I ask the short answers.
We have other experts on the Korean Peninsula in Korea, so I don't want to say too much about this. But I think the Chinese perspective is in some ways similar to the Trump perspective of the Trump 1.0, which is we must recognize North Korea as a nuclear state. We have failed for 30 years to reverse this program with sanctions, with pressure, with threats, and it has failed. And so the Chinese are no longer interested in trying to have a coercive policies against North Korea that cannot succeed. And I think they believe the status quo is acceptable. I think many in the United States feel that coercion and threats have failed. And the best way to move forward on denuclearization is, to borrow a South Korean phrase from many years ago, a sunshine policy. Let us try and promote greater Western presence, capitalist presence, South Korean presence, so as to help to create a new environment that would create a less threatening government out of North Korea. Donald Trump is not prepared to go there yet, but I think the Chinese are doing that. They have been doing that for 20, 30 years with border trade, consumer goods going into North Korea. South Korea has tried it many times, not always successful, but it's probably the best policy. Of course, the second issue on the Korean Peninsula is how great a threat the North Koreans pose to South Korea. Now, it's easy for me to say, living in Boston or Washington, that it's not a very great threat. But your government just yesterday reported that the North Koreans have been bolstering their defenses at the DMZ to prevent a South Korean invasion with fortresses. And those fortresses cannot threaten South Korea because you cannot move a fortress across the DMZ. Mm-hmm. And so everything we've heard from North Korea for the last 2, 3, 4 years is that they are accepting the status quo and they are defensive against a South Korean attack. Of course, South Korea has absolute superiority in every aspect of warfighting capability except nuclear weapons. Total conventional dominance, total conventional hegemony against one of the weakest economies and weakest militaries in the entire world. That would be North Korea. The only threat they could pose is a unilateral North Korean nuclear attack. And of course, that would mean the end of the Kim regime. And that's something they care about more than anything else. So from that strategic perspective, I think the status quo is something that your government indeed believes is best dealt with through cooperation rather than coercion. So I don't see a contradiction between Chinese policy, American policy, and South Korean policy.
Thank you. Professor Yu?
I think Chinese position on Korea Peninsula, that is Korean policy is consistent. doesn't change. It's still a denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, the peaceful settlement, and to create a sustainable, peaceful mechanism. This time, which I mentioned before, there's some minor change in the fact sheets of American side. I think that might be taken as an indicator that China doesn't want to be proactive on these issues. So in this occasion, it's not necessary to talk about these issues. But denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, that's China's consistent position. So not only one-sided targeting on North Korea on these issues, but to take it as a regional stability issues. In that sense, so the nuclear-powered submarine development of ROK is also a problem for China. But generally speaking, the landscape, security landscape of Northeast Asia is quite destabilizing. President Trump himself, I believe he's also interested in North Korea because in his first term, he met North DPRK leaders 3 times. Unbelievable. So I don't know what action he will take next, but that need to be seen. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Professor Choo, you want to add something for a couple minutes?
Yeah, just short remarks. Just my takeaway, my gut feeling is that, it seems like China, we already lost China and Russia on this particular question. They're not interested in resolving this North Korean nuclear issue at all. And that position has changed, was changed in 2023. And if you look at the joint summit, joint statement from the Sino-Russia summit in 2023 and 2024, we can all see that they lost interest. They deferred the responsibility of resolving this question to the concerned parties, implying the United States and North Korea. And unfortunately, what we have in hands is the United States, Japan, and South Korea. These are the only parties that are interested in denuclearizing North Korea, and this is why the trilateral relationship becomes ever more important. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentations and thoughtful responses. Well, there have been negative and positive evaluations of the summit, but I hear a very more nuanced and cautiously positive evaluation. And we know that the competition will not go away. However, this summit might be remembered as the initial stage, as Professor Ross and Professor Yu said, a new moment moving toward a new form of relations in which competition and coexistence are all present at the same time. And it has great implications for South Korea's diplomacy, whether or not it will give us a more diplomatic space or not, as Professor Choo said. So I think this was very, fruitful discussion. So on behalf of VAI and also Ewha University and the Ministry of Unification, which sponsored this seminar, I really express my sincere appreciation. And I'm sure that we will gather together for the upcoming other events as well. So thank you very much, all the audiences as well. Good, have a good day and good night. Thank you very much.